Have you ever heard a story so crazy, so unbelievable that you just wanted it to be true? Well, today we're diving into one of the greatest urban legends of the 20th century, the truly bizarre tale of Pan Am Flight 914. I mean, really think about that for a second. Could a plane just disappear from the face of the Earth, only to show up again almost 4 decades later, with every single person on board totally unchanged? It sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? Well, that's the wild legend we're unpacking today.
All right, so to really get this, we've got to go back, way back. Our story kicks off not with a reappearance, but with a vanishing act in the 1950s.
So picture this. It's July 2nd, 1955. Pan Am Flight 914, a charter flight, takes off from New York City, heading down to sunny Miami. 57 people on board. But then, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, it just blinks off the radar. Poof, gone. There was no distress call, no final words, nothing. A huge search mission is launched, but they find absolutely zero. No debris, no life rafts, no survivors. The official verdict, the plane crashed, and everyone was lost. Case closed.
37 years. Just let that sink in. A whole new generation was born and grew up. The world moved on from propeller planes to the jet age. And then, something totally impossible supposedly happened.
Okay, now let's jump forward in time to September 9th, 1992. We're in the air traffic control tower in Caracas, Venezuela. An air traffic controller is staring at his screen when a weird blip appears. It's an aircraft that's not on any flight schedule. And what's really odd is that it looks like an old propeller plane, something you'd expect to see in a history book, not on a modern radar.
And this, my friends, is where the story goes from weird to completely insane. The controller radios the mystery plane, and a panicked, confused voice crackles back. He identifies himself as the pilot of Pan Am Flight 914, and then he says he's scheduled to land at 9:55 a.m. on July 2nd, 1955. Can you imagine hearing that? The entire control tower just went dead silent.
So completely stunned, they clear a runway and this ghost flight actually lands. But what happened next on the tarmac was somehow even stranger than what they just heard over the radio. The ground crew cautiously approaches the plane, and the details are just mind-boggling. First off, the plane is a Douglas DC-4, a complete relic from another time. Then, as the doors open, people start coming out, and they're all dressed in 1950s fashion. They're holding old-school, handwritten paper tickets. But here's the absolute kicker. Not a single person on board, not the crew, not the passengers, had aged a single day since 1955. The story goes that when the ground crew told the pilot that the year was actually 1992, he completely freaked out. He started yelling over the radio for them to stay back, fired up the engines, and took off again without any clearance. The plane climbed back into the clouds, and then, just like it had done 37 years before, it simply vanished again.
I mean, come on. The story is just incredible. It makes you wonder, right? Did this plane somehow fly through a time warp? Did it get lost in the Bermuda Triangle? Was this some kind of supernatural event? It's the perfect mystery. Except, there's just one little problem. Is any of it actually real?
So for decades, this story has been passed around as this incredible true mystery, but the moment you start to actually look for the facts, this amazing story starts to fall apart, piece by piece. As investigators and fact-checkers started digging, they found something curious. Every single version of this story, no matter where they found it, could be traced back to one and only one original source.
And that source, it wasn't a credible news agency, it wasn't an aviation report. Nope. The entire story of Flight 914 was born in the pages of the Weekly World News, a wild American tabloid for making up stories about alien abductions, Bigfoot sightings, and, you guessed it, ghost planes.
So let's just put it plainly. When you check the actual official records, the whole story just dissolves into thin air. There's no report of a Pan Am Flight 914 ever going missing in 1955. There are zero records of a mystery plane landing in Caracas in 1992. The entire event was just made up.
So how does a totally fake story from a silly tabloid become a global urban legend? Well, it's a pretty classic recipe for misinformation. First, the tabloid invents and prints the story. Then, other outlets pick it up and repeat it without fact-checking. And then, the internet came along. Once it hit online forums and early social media, the story just exploded, spreading way faster than the truth could ever hope to.
Okay, so we've established the story is 100% fake. Case closed, right? Well, not quite, because that brings us to the most interesting question of all. Why? Why do so many of us want a story like this to be real?
You know, the story was so convincing because it was built that way. The writers packed it with all these specific official-sounding details, flight numbers, dates, even a made-up eyewitness air traffic controller. But the real magic of the story, the reason it stuck around, is emotional. It taps right into our fascination with the unknown, with time travel, and with that deep human hope that things we've lost could maybe, just maybe, come back.
And really, that's the big takeaway here. The legend of Flight 914 has nothing to do with airplanes or time warps. It's a perfect example of the power of a good story. It shows how a narrative that connects with our deepest hopes and fears can feel more real and more important than the actual truth.
So maybe the right question to ask isn't, is the story true, but why do we need stories like it? In a world that's mostly explained and predictable, maybe we'll always have a little part of us that's drawn to tales of the impossible, a story that hints that maybe, just maybe, a little bit of magic is still out there.